podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to the next episode in the special guest series. Today, we have Gab Sutton from the EFL Debate. Those of you who are active on Twitter, or X as it's now known, you probably would have seen Gab Sutton pop up many, many times. Very, very good knowledge of all of the Football League, but the Championship in particular. So, Gab, delighted to have you on, mate. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast and on the show. I'm really looking forward to have it to chatting to you, and can't wait to get started.
Yeah, no, fantastic, mate. And I think, you know, when we first started talking, what we wanted to try and do was to do a show that obviously is very Millwall related, but using your like plethora of knowledge throughout the Championship, and we can have a real kind of good conversation and debate as to, you know, our expectations for the season. How realistic are they? What you think of our transfer business so far? What you think we need to evolve to the next stage? So all good stuff, and yeah, hopefully we'll get some interesting nuggets, if that's all good with you.
Perfect.
Super. So do you know what? I'm going to ask you straight off the bat. Where do you think Millwall will finish this season?
Well, I can't quite reveal my exact finishing position because I've got a season preview that's coming out for the Championship on the 29th of July. So for certain purposes, I have to keep that a little bit under wraps. But I think what it's fair to say is last season there was a great finish to last season, 8 wins in your last 13 after Neil Harris came in. He certainly reconnected the club with the Millwall ethos, if you like, and he knows how to make the Den a fortress. So I think that's a great starting point. And, you know, if you're going into a dogfight, you want to go into it with Neil Harris. I do have certain reservations about him as a coach at Championship level because I think, for instance, if we look at Neil Harris's best stint, it was with a peak centre forward like Steve Morrison, who can spearhead attacks so well and has a bit of an old school kind of character about him. And I just do wonder, my sort of reservations, I guess, with Neil Harris is whether, as society evolves, as you know, profiles of people evolves, can he sort of find the next Steve Morrison? That's kind of what I would almost wonder, and whether Neil Harris can succeed consistently in the Championship in the modern era. That is a little bit of a question mark for me, but at the same time, I can only credit him for the work that he did at the end of last season because he did a fantastic job.
He did, and I think it's probably fair to say, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, mate, that without him, we wouldn't be in the Championship. I genuinely believe that. And I think you used the term firefighter, I think, on one of your recent shows.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting analogy. Essentially, you go into war, firefighting, whatever you want to call it. If you were going to try and get yourself out of a muddy situation, Neil Harris is the man you wanted at the job for that.
Yeah.
I think it's also fair to say a lot of fans, when he was signed back to the club, a lot of fans felt that he was the Mr. Here right now, but maybe not the future. I think that's probably a little bit unfair, but I really do agree with you that this is definitely going to be a different test for him. You know, we're starting at a level playing field. It's not backs against the wall straight away, and he's got to try and evolve his playing style. How do you think he does that, Gab?
I don't think he will. I think that it's got to a stage where Neil Harris has got his template. I'm sure he's a really intelligent man. I'm sure he is always somebody that's looking to pick up new ideas. You don't have the sort of career that he's had if that's not the case. I also feel like I don't think he would have got a Championship job at this stage of his career if it wasn't for his affinity and connection with Millwall. Now, that's not to say that it was the wrong appointment, because first of all, he's done a brilliant job, and that can count for something. If you've got a manager who really cares about your football club, who has that sense of service, who has that connection with fans, who knows how to create a siege mentality at Millwall, that counts for a lot. That can be really powerful. So I'm not completely playing that down. At the same time, I'm sort of feeling a bit conflicted about the future of Millwall and how they can sort of meet their ambitions in the Championship. Because on the one hand, I know that if you go down the Joe Edwards route, and there's other managers in the past that have tried to introduce a different style to Millwall, and it hasn't worked. And I think you've got to be realistic about that the fan base just want to see high intensity football, challenges going in, early balls forward. That's the kind of football that Millwall fans are going to respond to. That's just how it is, right? At the same time, I do feel like there's going to be a different level of coaching now that's maybe going to be needed for Millwall to meet their ambition sustainably. And I'm a little bit in the unknown as to whether Neil Harris can provide that, again, whilst giving him so much respect for the incredible work that he's done for Millwall, both in his first stint and taking over at the back end of last season.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that the Joe Edwards experiment that we went down, and I feel for Joe, by the way, because I'm sure he's a superb coach, and you saw glimpses of what he was trying to do, but ultimately he was trying to teach a group of players that, again, with the greatest respect to them, they're not that. They can't play that tiki-taka, slow build-up football. We're not that. We haven't got a squad that's been built around that. But it's interesting. You want to touch on something you just talked about. You mentioned the Neil Harris template. Now, the squad that we have at the moment, and I use at the moment because we're recording this on the 21st of July. So who knows where we'll end up with, from a player's perspective come the start of the season. But the squad we have at the moment is very much a Gary Rowett squad. And what I mean by that is it's a squad that is set up to play a certain system.
Yeah.
And that system is not the one that I believe when you say Neil Harris template is the same. So how do you feel that will also naturally evolve?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. For me, if I think of a Neil Harris team at its best, I definitely think of 4-4-2. I think Macaulay Langstaff is a great signing, but I see him very much in the Lee Gregory mould. If we're using the sort of the old templates, I think Macaulay Langstaff's going to be a great presser for you. He's going to be constantly on the run. I don't mean on from the law. I mean on the move. Pressing defence and stuff. But I also think he can finish as well. But I don't think. I think if you have, I don't trust Neil Harris as an in-possession coach in order to create the volume of chances required for Macaulay Langstaff to score goals at the Championship level. Because as well as it being a massive step up for him, he was playing in a Notts County side that played with a very expansive style that created lots of chances. I don't think that without a target man partner, Millwall can create the volume of chances that Macaulay Langstaff's going to need. So for me, you invest as much as you're able to in getting the right target man in. If your plan for the short to mid-term is to back Neil Harris and sort of go with him, because I don't think Neil Harris can be successful at Championship level without a target man. So for me, that's what this season's going to hang on.
That's interesting, and we'll come on to the type of player that may be needed as a target man, and I agree with you that we are target man short. And if I'm honest, I think the club know that as well, and I'm sure they're actively looking. But one thing I would say is that I agree that Neil Harris's success so far at Championship level has been based around 4-4-2. We've never replaced Steve Morrison, in all honesty.
Oh God, yeah,
we've never.
I mean, Jesus Christ, he at his best, he was such a handful, wasn't he? I mean,
he was.
As a centre half, you'd just absolutely hate to play against him, wouldn't you?
You would, and lucky enough to have interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. He's such a great bloke, and obviously now coaching at Sutton. But so just going back to that, I think I agree. Neil Harris's success has been 4-4-2, target man, diagonals, midfield winning the second balls. Agreed. Yeah. However, I also think it's fair to say that last season, when he came back, he had to keep it to his core and his basics. There was no opportunity to try and evolve that style because it was just, I know what we can do with this group of players to make it successful. I don't care if it's not pleasing on the eye. We need to get points. I want to give Neil Harris this season before coining him as just that, because he has said he's evolved as a coach, and I would love to just see what that entails, So all of the points you made, I think, are totally fair, but I also think it's fair to call out that he hasn't really had the opportunity at Championship level with this Millwall group to try other things, because it was all about do or die last season, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. I mean, I think the the opportunities there for him to show how he's evolved. I think formationally he's shown some flexibility in his previous jobs. I think he went with what was it, 4-2-3-1, I think, at Gillingham. He actually played 3 at the back when he first came into Gillingham, I think, as well. And then at Cambridge, might have been 4-2-3-1. I'm not 100% sure.
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah. So I think 4-2-3-1 is an option for him as well. I would kind of go back to it though. I don't think Macaulay Langstaff's going to do it as a lone striker in the Neil Harris team. So for me, I think it's got to be 4-4-2. And hopefully you can have the players that you need. So listen, I'm open to being proven wrong about Neil Harris and him showing that he can evolve some of his ideas. But it's just not something I would necessarily anticipate.
So if you believe that a target man is absolutely key for success for us at this level, is there any kind of, we're not starting a rumor mill here. This is just us talking about what we think we need. But is there a type of player that you've seen, or I've always thought the likes of, I hate to say it because we've been linked with him so many times, he's always gone elsewhere, but Kiefer Moore, someone like that, a George Hurst at Ipswich, those types of sort of mobile target men, for me, are the sort of players we should be looking at. Do you agree, Gab?
Yeah, definitely. I think Kiefer Moore would have been ideal, and if you would have been able to have maybe stretched the budget a little bit to get him in, then I think it could have been worth it. At the same time, he's gone to Sheffield United, who are a relegated Premier League club, and maybe it's just not realistic for Millwall to compete with his wages, which I do understand. So yeah, I think for me, it's a case of kind of looking. Is there someone around Eastern Europe? Is there someone around, across the continent that we could get in that's got a bit of a... Because this is the other thing. It's not just about being a tall striker, right? It's also about having that bit of physicality, but also that aggression, that willingness to scrap with centre half, something that... Millwall fans are going to love. I think George Hurst is he's 6'3", but I actually think he's more of a deft striker where you want to give it the ball to his chest or to his feet, and he can do well with sort of accurate service. But I look at somebody like, and I am going to go back to the Steve Morrison days, where it's like you could even have the ball sort of loosely in his direction, and he would be able to make something of it because he was constantly fighting centre backs and sort of and making his presence felt. So for me, that's the sort of thing that Millwall are going to need from their centre forward. So hopefully you can get that, but I think it's going to place a lot on the recruitment team and what they can find.
It does, and I definitely want to talk to you a bit about the recruitment strategy in terms of what we're trying to solve for ultimately when we come to the sort of players that we're trying to bring into the club. But before we do that, let's just touch on the players that we already have brought into the club. So over the summer, obviously, we've signed Japhet Tanganga, who for Millwall is a huge coup. I think he's got the ability to be one of the best centre backs in the league, in my opinion. And usually we get players like him on loan and they end up doing really well and going elsewhere. So it's nice for us to
get
sign
permanently. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Super signing, and would have imagined he'd cost a significant chunk of the budget. But so we brought him in. Sean Hutchinson has re-signed for a year. You mentioned, of course, Macaulay Langstaff, and then we got Lucas Jensen in. What's your assessment? I'll ask you 2 questions in one. What's your assessment of our transfer business so far? And then also, given your knowledge of the Championship, how would you grade it in terms of against some of the other teams that either have or haven't done business so far?
Sure. Well, I think with Lucas Jensen, what you've got is a really commanding goalkeeper, because I think he's 6'7", something like that. I don't know if you remember Brian Jensen, who was a goalkeeper for Burnley, who was a big, imposing figure, played for them in the Premier League. I think, so Lucas Jensen will feel like, he's going to be a similar sort of presence, if you like. He's going to be good coming for crosses and things like that. So, so I think that's a good signing. Again, Macaulay Langstaff, I think if you can give him chances, I think he can score goals and also fit into what Neil Harris wants from his centre forwards against the ball. A bit of an adjustment for him stylistically, but hopefully you can have that target man that'll help create chances for him. Sean Hutchinson feels like a bit of a a bit of a dressing room signing, if you like, someone that's Neil Harris knows and trusts. A little bit of a, you could say you're sort of looking backwards a little bit there. You don't want to have a kind of a 2017 reunion. But no, I think Sean Hutchinson.
It's the same outcome, mate. We'll take it.
But listen, I think Sean Hutchinson's been a very reliable Championship defender over the last few years, hasn't he? So I can see why Neil Harris has gone for him.
And what do you make of the Tanganga signing? Because I think, obviously, it's probably, and I'm going to say it, I think it's probably our biggest signing ever. Like, genuinely, I think it is, because it's for the status and probably the salary he's costing us. A few Millwall fans have said he's the best defender in the league. I wouldn't go that far. I think there's others that are probably slightly better, helped by, of course, Jacob Greaves no longer being in the league. But, how good do you think he could be for Millwall?
I think it's a huge signing. You saw in Harris's first game back at Southampton how important Japhet Tanganga is going to be. I think he's a really athletic defender, which I think is really important as a partner for Jake Cooper. So, yeah, those two. I think if you wanted to make a case for Millwall staying up comfortably this season, then I think, one of the first places you'd go to would be that centre-back pairing of Japhet Tanganga and Jake Cooper.
Yeah, and I think, good Millwall teams have had really good centre-back pairings and usually good centre-forward pairings. So arguably you've now got a good centre-back pairing as long as they stay fit in Jake Cooper and Japhet Tanganga. And then up front, you've got, Langstaff, Bradshaw, Nisbet. I would be surprised if both Nisbet and Bradshaw are still at the club, both of them, come the start of the season. I think, I don't know this, but my guess is that Harris prefers Bradshaw, but we will get it's more of a better financial deal for the club probably to move Bradshaw on than it is Nisbet at the minute. And I think that's probably, it will go down to a trade-off as to what we want to do there. I went to the Gillingham friendly and the difference in hold-up play, pressing, movement between Bradshaw and Nisbet was really stark. What is your view on, Tom Bradshaw at this level and, Kevin Nisbet's topsy-turvy start to his Millwall career?
Well, again, I feel for Tom Bradshaw a little bit because I feel like he's probably at a similar level to somebody like Lee Gregory, if not maybe a better goal scorer, better finisher, and a similar level of work rate. But he's not had Morrow to play alongside. So when much of Tom Bradshaw's tenure has been pretty much as a lone striker in a Gary Rowett team, which is different to playing in a front two in a Neil Harris team. So I think he's probably a better finisher than Lee Gregory with a similar work ethic, but the circumstances have maybe gone against him as maybe an individual goal scorer.
Yeah, and I honestly think if you put, Tom Bradshaw in a lower end Championship side or a top end League One side in a two up top, I think he would score a lot of goals.
Yeah.
So remains to be seen where he will be. So just sort of segue into our recruitment strategy. So for me, as fans, of course, we're like, well, we need to sign 2 wingers, we need to sign another centre back, we need to sign a left back, another goalkeeper, whatever. But ultimately, there is an objective that underlines all of this, which is what we're trying to achieve with that plan. And I would love to just touch on, your view of what you think we need to be doing from a recruitment standpoint in order for us to get to that kind of top 6. I've got a few bits and bobs here that I'd like to talk through. But yeah, Gab, what's your view in terms of if we're going to be this side that is able genuinely to compete at the top end of the Championship, knowing that our budget is not there, how do we do that?
Well, I think you've got to maximise the den and make it as big a fortress as possible. And for me, to make that happen, you need as much pressure from the front as possible. So again, that's why for me, I think two up top is probably going to be the way, because I don't really think that you're going to, if you play with a one up top system, I don't really see that you're going to use the extra man in a deeper area that well anyway, because you're probably going to go long anyway. So you'd actually rather have two up top there and constantly keep opposing defenders on their toes, and then have the midfield following up and sort of create that. Because I think for me, Millwall as a club, I am torn about this, because I do see how the game is evolving and it's not the same, and you've got to sort of move with the times. But I also see something quite powerful in embracing the club's individuality, which can be a strength. I think it can be a weakness sometimes, because I think fans are maybe a little bit less bit more reluctant to embrace a different style of football, but at the same time, when they see something they like, they really go with it. So you've kind of got to maximize the strength rather than anything else, really. So for me, two up top, be very aggressive, try and evolve from a coaching point of view, and pick up different nuances, and hopefully Neil Harris can do that. But I probably see the way forward to be embracing the individuality of Millwall and moving forward that way, really.
Yeah, and we certainly saw that, right? Our performances at the Den under Neil Harris in his 13 games in charge were excellent, and we beat some very good sides, and sides that, let's be honest, the likes of Watford, who we beat 1-0, we've actually got them on the first game of the season. Just some of the talent they have in their team is, they should be further up the league, and we're able to beat teams, but we beat them, to your point, by maximising our strengths, which is making sure we win second balls, making sure that we are first contact in the box at both ends, pressing from the front, high energy. I dread to think the amount of mileage that our central midfielders have to put in. So I agree with that, but then you have to have the players that can do that. And, I would imagine that Steve Gallen, our new recruitment guy, is looking at a few different indicators to say, okay, well, how do I achieve that, right? So I think, first of all, he's probably looking to try and reduce the age of the squad, because we've got one of the oldest squads in the league. So I'd imagine that's one of the things he's looking to do. He's probably looking to try and take a squad of players that's been built to play a 3-5-2 to enable us to play either a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1 more successfully with more fluidity. We don't really have wingers, Gab. When I look at the squad, we have Adam Mayer, who's injured and is very much unproven at this level.
He's a big talent, though, at Morecambe. I really liked him at Morecambe. He's got a wonderful left foot on him, and he can get up and down as well. So I think he's a really exciting prospect.
That's good. And do you know what? We need this. So one of the other things as well, just segueing slightly, is we've never been very good at selling assets. We really haven't,
Just expand on that point, Chris, while I get a charger for my phone, because I'm running a bit out of battery. So
yes, mate. No, I can talk all day. Don't you worry. So Millwall fans listening to this, you'll know that we could have sold Zian Fleming the summer before last for a significant fee. We didn't. Jed Wallace walked away on a free. Going back a long time, we didn't get anywhere near the amount of money that we felt we should have done for Tim Cahill. We've notoriously not been very good at selling assets. And I think another part of our recruitment strategy will be to sign players that have a potential big upside. And some of that will be youth players, which is what triggered me when you talked about Adam Mayer, Gab, because, Adam Mayer probably was a couple of $100,000 investment. I know he's injured at the minute, but Mill will be looking to, get him in and around the first team and hope his value increases. The same for Imaku, a couple of $100,000. I don't know, but I would imagine we paid a couple of $100,000 for him. And again, we'll be looking to obviously maximize him for us, but also for him to be worth 4, 5, 6, 10 times more than what he is there. So I think that's another part of the recruitment strategy. And then you look at where you get your better value, and your better value is either in the European leagues or it's in the lower league, which is why we've gone after top scorer in League Two. we've gone after, on paper, the best goalkeeper in League One. So I don't know how much of that you heard, Gab, but I'm just trying
I heard it.
I'm just trying to think about, again, when you have the budgets that we have, which is bottom 6 in the Championship, and you are trying to ultimately improve your profitability, but also reducing your age, your playing style, how important is it for a club like Millwall to go into the lower leagues, go to Morecambe, go to Lincoln, go to Notts County, and pluck these players out and start to embed them into our first team?
Yeah, I think it's really important. For me, one of my beliefs with football, if you want to be successful, excuse me, I'm a bit out of breath. I just walked up and downstairs. You want to basically start from a core playing identity. I think that's going to be that's really important. So every player that you bring in is brought in with a strategy of how you're going to use and get the best out of them. So you might have a striker that scored 20 goals in another league, but if they don't fit into the way that you want to play, then actually it's not a great fit. So I think that's a really important starting point. And then what you want to try and do, and I think this is how Millwall kind of solves the dilemma, which is we want to be proud of our own playing identity and our culture and all that kind of thing, but we also want to try and be competitive in the modern era. So there's a balancing act to be struck there. I think the way forward is you start from your core identity, but then you try and bring in players that fit into that, but also might be a 10-15% improvement in a certain area. So you gradually build up a squad that fits into what you want to do, but also we've got this centre half who's an absolute monster in the air and is going to win its headers and is really aggressive, but he can play a bit better than the centre half we've got at the moment. So it's those sorts of things where you try and add different dimensions without compromising the playing identity. And that's the sort of thing that can take a bit of time. But I think if you're very tunnel visioned and you're very clear about what you want, then I think it can be achieved.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree. And it's those fine margins. And for me, yes, as Millwall fans, we do want to see up and at 'em, a certain style, and you described it perfectly. But I do think we will forego some of that in order, to your point, if we're seeing certain things that we like. And I think the problem is, as fans, we kind of got burnt a little bit, I suppose, with the Joe Edwards, piece, because it was such a stark difference, and it ended up being almost cost us our, and I don't blame Joe Edwards for this, by the way, I just want to make that perfectly clear, but it almost cost us our championship status. I think it needs to be gradual, and what I'm hoping is, that Neil Harris, I don't know how long he's going to be here for, he's got another year on his contract, but he starts to put the building blocks in place through the recruitment this summer, through a gradual involvement of our playing style that plays into what makes a success. But also, as you said, it's just that 5-10% little bit more. Players like Zian Flynn, Casper De Norre. Casper De Norre can be a Rolls Royce of a central midfielder at this level. I promise you. I don't know.
You like him then, do you?
He's excellent. He's not that going around crunching midfielder, but if we can have a team around him that does that, and we say, okay, Casper, here's the ball, you go and play. This is what I mean. We have to be. I think we have to sort of bend our expectations slightly and allow players like Casper De Norre, like Romain Esse, that little bit of freedom that is going to help us take to that next level.
Talk to me about Billy Mitchell then, because I remember a couple of years ago there was lots of excitement about Billy Mitchell and him having that sort of that Millwall edge, if you like, but also being able to carry the ball and having a lot of strengths. I'm just wondering, do you feel like he's been a bit on and off with injuries? Has he progressed maybe in the way that you'd have hoped, or where do you feel you're at with him?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think Billy's injured right now, so we haven't seen him over the pre-season. But I think for me, Billy divides the fan base. I think it's fair to say. Any Millwall fan listening to this, I think, will agree with that. My view of Billy is, has he progressed as much as I would have liked him to since he first come into the team? Probably not. But I think he is a very valuable member of the team. And up until this point, is one of the first names on the team sheet from the playing style that Neil Harris wants to play. And what I mean by that is Billy is very aggressive in his press. He's got some engine on him. So in terms of getting up and down the pitch, blocks, challenges, interceptions. Not that we often do this, but he's also very good at kind of receiving the ball in tight spaces if we're sort of playing backs to goal and stuff like that. So I think he is a very credible member of the squad. But do I think he's going to play 30-yard, lobbed passes and, through balls to Macaulay Lang stuff? He's probably not that. So again, I think it really does depend on the playing style that we're going to go with. But that's where Casper De Norre's strengths are.
Sure.
Casper De Norre's not a high energy presser. He's not going to go around crunching, but he can pick a pass. And at times, as I say, he does look like a bit of a Rolls Royce of a midfielder. So it really does depend on what we want to do. But sticking with midfield, Gab, one of the things that's kind of in my mind, and this wouldn't be priority number one, but over a couple of different spells now, George Saville has been a real staple of the Millwall midfield. He's, again, incredibly important from a leadership perspective. I think he sets the tone and sets the pace of games really well for us, particularly at home. And he's reaching, probably the tail end of his career. He's into his early 30s. How important is it, do you think, for clubs to be game planning kind of, the future? So a future without George Saville. How should we be looking into that?
Good question. How should you be looking at that? I don't know that it's so much. I think when you were talking about players who are 30 or 29 or 30 or around that sort of age, I don't know that it's so much of we've got to immediately plan for life because players can continue to perform to a decent. You had Sean Williams up to about 33, didn't you? Something like that. Yeah. So I don't necessarily see that it has to be a case of you've got to intentionally succession plan, although that can be valuable. But I think generally building a squad that you feel like can grow together and that you've got players who are going to improve rather than drop off. And of course, there needs to be a balance. Of course, you need some experienced heads that can be really valuable and who can sort of have that connection with the fans and who can sort of set the tone. I think that's really important. But yeah, I think having players that are sort of growing and having the odd understudy in some positions, I think that can be really valuable as well, because you want to build a squad where there's a kind of a conveyor belt, if you like, where you're not having to recruit new players every summer, but you actually got players who you feel like can step up and fill that void and actually give yourselves fewer decisions to make. And then with those decisions, it becomes easier to make the right ones.
Agreed. And I think, Savs has got another year or two left in it. I wasn't suggesting he hasn't, but I think it's just a case of how important is it as a club to be looking at these real key, and Sean Hutchinson's another one, by the way, real key players, whether they're on the pitch, off the pitch, whatever, how, if you take that element out of a dressing room, how do you feel that? And there's this thing that goes kind of beyond the pitch. But another point I'd love to just get your perspective on is that we've, I think Zian Fleming was the first. Then we signed Vogelsammer, didn't really work out for him. And then Casper De Norre last summer. And of course, I'm talking about like our investment into, foreign leagues, which Millwall notoriously haven't done very well at. And literally just this morning, we got linked with I don't know how true it is, but linked with a player from South Korea, So how important is that? Because I'm not, again, going back to the recruitment strategy, I'm sure there's many clubs out there that part of their recruitment strategy and their rationale for going after players is for, the commercial element of what these, foreign investments can bring. Just last season, Millwall fans will testify the amount of Dutch and German supporters down the Den has increased, right? Which can only really, when you think about it, be a good thing for the club. So, when you hear foreign leagues and players there and Millwall in the same sentence, what's your views on that?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a common thing, does it? Because it feels like Millwall are a club that historically have you've liked your Irish players, haven't you, over the years? But generally you like to go for British players. But I think I think there's value to be had in the European markets, and I think that you can get players of a higher standard than you'd be able to get in the domestic market. So I think it really is important to be aware of these players. And you know what? It's like, this is the thing that amazes me about football, Chris, that clubs are willing to spend millions of pounds on their recruitment, and yet actually when it comes to the actual recruitment process, it can be sometimes a little bit slapdash, a little bit, oh, we know this person from here, or the manager knows this person, or we've had him before at the club and we liked him. And it's a lot of that, which is kind of like 1980s 90s stuff. So actually I think it's really important that you invest in the recruitment process as well as the recruitment itself.
Agree. And obviously we had a bit of a changeover in the recruitment department in the summer. So, we had Alex Aldridge leave the club, and Steve Gallen come in, who's formerly of Charlton and a couple of other clubs. So it'd be really interesting to see how that organically evolves. I think when you look at the deals we've done so far, Tanganga's been courted all summer, so I wouldn't imagine that's a Gallen thing. I could be wrong. Langstaff, I'm not so sure on. Hutch was already there, and then obviously Lucas Jensen. We only reacted to signing him because of the tragic passing of Matty Sarkic.
Well, Chris, Neil Harris would have managed against Macaulay Langstaff, or he'd been in the same league when he was Gillingham manager, and obviously Macaulay Langstaff was at Notts County, so that might have been a Neil Harris signing. True.
And that probably brings me to my next question, Gab. Like, out of the players we've signed, which one do you think, as a Millwall fan, we should be most excited by?
Good question. I think I do like the Macaulay Langstaff signing. I'm really excited to see how he steps up. I think Jensen could be a good addition. But again, these are players that I don't want to sort of put the expectation too highly on them straight away, because it is a big step up for both of them. Like League One to the Championship's a big step up. League Two certainly is. But hopefully they can do well.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, listen, with our budgets, with our resources, I think we have to be really clever. And I think we've made some really clever signings. And the best Millwall strikers of recent years have certainly been from non-league. So we can certainly look to them for inspiration. I'm sure Neil Harris has spoken all about his career and Steve Morrison's career and Lee Gregory's career to Macaulay Langstaff, and looking forward to it with optimism. Just to touch on the Championship, Gab, is there a club that you've been really impressed with by their business, or just anything in the Championship that you think worthwhile sort of sharing with the Millwall fans?
Good question. I think I'm really excited to see what Sunderland do, because I think they've got a very young squad. We've talked about having players that you feel can develop. I think Sunderland have got a lot of those players, so I think there's definitely potential there. Leeds, I can see why they're many people's favourites. So they're obviously going to be a threat. West Brom, obviously, with new ownership as well. Luton Town might be considered the best of the three clubs coming down from the Premier League. But I think it's going to be an open league next year, and I think the league's probably weakened by Southampton going up, by Leicester going up, and losing a manager like Kieran McKenna. So I think it's going to be quite open. So that should make it an exciting spectacle.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see if we see this kind of divergence that we saw last year, because we kind of had the sort of three clubs at the top that were clear, if you like, all of which got promoted. You then had between sort of 4th and 12th, all of which could have got in the playoffs really at some stage. And then from 13th downwards, which we finished 13th, which you could argue is a bit of a false position based on where we were all season. Any of those teams could have come down. So it'd be really interesting to see if it is as open as that, more open. Are there going to be anyone that runs away with it? Is anyone going to do an Ipswich? I look at Portsmouth squad, Oxford squad. I can't really see it. But have you got any views on that?
I think all three of the promoted clubs will feel like they'll expect to be in the bottom 8 because I think it's a big step up for them. There's a few sides that finished mid-table last season that I think could possibly get dragged in. So yeah, I think the league's slightly weakened, and even even with my team Birmingham being relegated, I think if we'd stayed up, we'd have probably finished mid-table and even pushed for the top half with the squad that we've got in the investment that's there. So I think the league is weakened a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how things go.
Yeah, and just to touch on your team, Birmingham, I think if you don't finish in the top 2, that's got to be a travesty, hasn't it? With the investment that you boys
I think that's got to be the expectation for us, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think just to sort of close out then on expectations. So I think, there's always this head and heart sentiment, my heart says with a couple of wingers, a good target man, and then maybe a little bit more depth, that we can be top 6 challengers. My head says probably, if you break the league into thirds, probably that mid-third. So sorry, the second third. So anywhere between sort of 9th and 16th, I think is realistically where we'll be. But again, it really does depend on recruitment. I think the league's going to be wide open. You look at Derby. They've made some really good business so far. They're the ones that I would say have certainly putting their best foot forward. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think we go into it with optimism. We're notoriously quite slow starters. We usually win our first game, but then we tail off quite a bit. So be interesting to see how that goes.
Although in 17-18, you're in the bottom half, weren't you, for large parts of it, and then went on this mad run of winning 6 straight away games and then ended up going on this incredible run.
We did, and then it all came crashing down at home to Fulham. I remember that game very well.
Yeah.
But yes, we can all hope, Gab. We can all hope. And, I am, very much expecting a few more players in the door in the next week or so, and that may change the whole outlook. Recruitment's such a big part of the process. But, Gab, any sort of closing thoughts or anything that you wanted to sort of share with Millwall fans before we close out?
Well, I just want to say good luck to you, really, because I think you got some good people there, fantastic community club. So I wish you a lot of success, and hopefully you can progress next season. So good luck for next season. If you want more of my stuff, you can drop me a follow on Twitter at Gab Sutton. I'm also doing a series of podcasts across the EFL called EFL Debate, some summer deep dives that I've done. So you can follow those on Spotify and on YouTube at EFL Debate, and you can obviously follow me on Twitter at Gab Sutton.
Yes, guys, make sure you do all of that, and we'll put those links in the description when we send this show out as well, Gab. So make sure you check out Gab's podcast, YouTube, etc. Some really good content, especially if you're interested in more than just Millwall and the wider EFL. Some really good bits there. Okay, listeners. Well, hopefully that was really insightful to hear, a very knowledgeable person on the Football League and their perspective on Millwall. As Gab said earlier, he's going to be doing like his predictions overall. So be really interested and eagerly awaiting what you think of our chances this season. I've already given mine. But thanks for listening. Thank you, Gab, for coming on. And I'm sure this won't be the last time we connect, but enjoy the rest of your week wherever you're listening. And bye for now.
Sports Social Podcast Network.